Quick warning, if you care about the events of the story and you haven't played the game, I would leave off from watching this video until you've played it, because this video will spoil some of the major events, but with that said, I don't think it really matters that much, as you'll see from what I'm saying in the video. If I asked you to tell me what Dragon's Dogma 2 is about, you would probably give me some description of the plot. There's a Queen Regent who acts as a puppet master to try and smear you, the rightful sovereign by law, as a villain so she can put her own son on the throne. If I then ask you what it's really about, you'd likely turn to the ending and talk about the petulant god who can't trust his own subjects to carry out the cycle he so adores. So he intervenes to achieve his goals, making himself present in a world he really should be just watching over. Also, he's definitely Jon Ronson.
Oblivion fades. This tale's end has been unwritten. My heart, it aches.
Pudsey was sailing to New York like a fucking king. Pudsey was Kate Winslet, and Floppy and Josie were Leonardo DiCaprio.
If I asked you again, you might turn to the base storyline again, and dig deeper, reading into Disa's character. She operates within a patriarchy that won't allow her to personally take the throne, so she wishes instead to have her son there, who she can then control. Yes, I know the story doesn't change if you're arisen as a woman, but I think the arisen sovereign overrides the patriarchal system. If I then asked you again, you'd probably commit some kind of violent crime against me. The point I'm making, if you couldn't tell, is that the driving force of Dragon's Dogma 2 has, from what I've seen of the online discourse, seemed to elude most players. In a vacuum, yes, the story leaves a fair bit to be desired, but I want to put forward the case that this game provides potentially the best kind of story a game can, because let's be honest, there's no need to judge this story in a vacuum. Please put down your pitchfork. This game's plot acts in tandem with its world as a vessel. As soon as you arrive in Vermund, your control kicks in and the actual story begins. Your story. Yes, I'm making one of those points. There's a reason Capcom released the character creator a couple weeks before the actual game. You're meant to have your Arisen and your pawn ready to go so you can just get on with your grand quest. That way, the pace of the intro isn't lost, and PC players get more of a chance to see how poorly their copy performs before their 2-hour refund period is up. So the story kicks right into action with little delay, which is great. With that in mind, before I go into why the story is so good, I want to mention part of the opening hours that isn't, and that's actually the dragon itself. You see, the first game had this cool intro scene where you get to see a glimpse of a happy little seaside village before it gets leveled by a dragon. And the whole sequence where you get your heart stolen is so well done, especially that shot of you actually losing your heart. In the sequel, you don't get any of that. Instead, arriving at Melve triggers a flashback in your character's mind to when the town was beset by the dragon, and you see a short scene paralleling the first game's dragon introduction. But here there isn't actually an established, pleasant, small-scaled status quo that is being disturbed, so we don't necessarily feel as invested in the scene. And for some reason, the camera in this scene does very little to add to the impact of the moment. There's a similar shot of your character's face as they struggle on the ground, but nothing comparable to that shot of your heart getting ripped out. The flaccidity of this part also leads to the following scenes failing to deliver much as well. In the first game, you were thrust into this adventure as soon as you woke up and met Rook, and you felt your quest calling for you to take down the bastard who stole your heart, but here? You were kind of already on your way to Vernworth, so being called there officially by Sir Gregor doesn't really change your trajectory in any meaningful way. Speaking of Sir Gregor, that leads me nicely to the first moment that made me love this game's story, the quest, Till Death Do Us Part. You might be thinking this quest has no relevance to the game's overarching plot, with it not being a key progression quest and whatnot, and you'd be right, but honestly, this quest was my first proper trial in this game. You'll likely first hear about this quest from Oswald over here.
Sir Ludolf's lust knows no bounds. This time he's set his sights on the Watchhead's missus. Still, however pressed, no man is like to hand her his own wife, eh? The Watchhead refused, and rightly so. But his lordship doesn't take no for an answer. He employed his usual method, which is to say, he dispatched the Watchhead on a mission to slay a Dullahan. Poor old Gregor departed last night. I'm sorry to say it, but he shan't be returning alive. That's the sort of man that noble is, you see. Naught noble about him, if you ask me.
And maybe then have a chat with Lady Margit about Ludolf.
Good tidings to you. Are you the Arisen, perchance? Aye, I thought you might be the one. My husband spoke of you, you see. 'Tis through him I hear much of the gossip going around town. I suppose you're here to see him. You'll have to come another day, I fear. He's been sent out on a mission, and I can't say when he'll return. 'Tis a perilous mission at that. I've heard he is to fell a Dullahan at the Ill-Doer's resting place. I worry for him. I do hope he'll fare all right. As I've said, my husband has left to slay a Dullahan at the Ill-Doer's resting place. I can't tell you when he'll return, so you'd best visit us another day, sir. Oh, Sir Ludolf, you say? Aye, we're acquainted. He's been coming around oft of late. As I recall, his visit started just before Gregor was given his new assignment. Why are you asking me about him? Does this have aught to do with my husband? What? No. You mean... not my Gregor? Sir Arisen, I beg of you, you must save my husband. You will be repaid, I swear it. No amount of gold can compare to his life. Just please, save him. Oh, thank goodness. Pray, go to him at once. My husband's life is in your hands, sir.
Now, when I first reached this point in the game, I was vaguely fond of Gregor. He seemed like a pretty decent guy, and this was a terrible fate for him. So naturally, knowing full well I was charging headfirst into almost certain doom, seeing as this was really early in the game, I set off to the forest to help him with this Dullahan. Ultimately, this quest can go one of two ways. Gregor either lives or he dies. And what happens when you return to Vernworth doesn't vary beyond those two results. Keep that fact in mind. What actually happened in my quest was that the journey killed me several times, but I just about made it and managed to help him and his friends defeat the boss. Great, right? Well, apparently not for Gregor, because he and his team then turned around and started attacking me. I didn't want to fight him, obviously, and in hindsight I really should have just fucked off when he did that, but I eventually fought back and killed everyone, including Sir Gregor. Well, I say everyone, there was one guy who wouldn't die even after running out of health. He even respawned at the shore when I threw him into the brine. I gave up on him and just left, bringing Gregor's body with me as far as the forest entrance before losing him in the commotion of an asp ambush. So after that, I returned to Vernworth on an ox cart with nothing but bad news about Lady Margaret's husband. Now you might be wondering why the footage I'm showing is me acing this quest with no problems at all, and that's because I didn't have the foresight at the time to record this part of the game on my first playthrough, meaning that my experience with Till Death Do Us Part is nothing but a memory for me and a story to you. And that brings us back here. This quest is completely optional, you don't need to do it. None of the characters involved have any story significance by the time you reach this point in the game, at least not for the critical path. So surely this whole anecdote should be entirely irrelevant to any discussion about the story, since it's the main narrative that people seem to have a problem with. Well, I'm here to actually say that the main story is one of the least important parts of this game. Let's put it this way, what part of bringing Deeza's schemes to light is fun and engaging from the standpoint of this as an interactive adventure? Reporting some shit to Captain Bratton about the true identity of the False Arisen doesn't tangibly do anything for the player, but going on the journey to the Nameless Village in Eastern Vermund absolutely does. Likewise, me failing this quest that took me ages to even get to only adds to my personal grand adventure. The roleplay aspect of this game was deepened so much to me by this one quest, since it allowed me to directly imprint my own feelings on the situation onto my character. I had just killed these innocent men and had to deliver the news on one of their deaths to his wife at home. In the implied story here, my character couldn't bring herself to tell Margit how her husband died, resulting in Margit insisting it wasn't my fault. When it was my fucking fault! I killed him! And I went the rest of my playthrough with that in the back of my head. That kind of experience, if you allow yourself to truly become immersed in a world, can characterize a silent protagonist more than any story events. So I'll ask again, what part of bringing Deeza's schemes to light is fun and engaging from the standpoint of this as an interactive adventure? That's not a rhetorical question, you should think about it. The point is, the actual story beats don't mean anything on their own. They only serve to facilitate the adventure had by the player. Every player. That's why it's so good. Every player is able, if they are immersed, to go on their own adventure in this world and walk their own path. Looking at the Steam stats, nearly 20% of PC players have the closure achievement for getting the true ending, which is likely a similar figure on the other platforms. And with the game at around 2.5 million sales, that means somewhere in the region of 500,000 people have finished the game. I can say with full confidence that every single one of those stories is unique. And I'll say with just as much confidence that a narrative that takes centre stage and has impressive and ambitious twists and turns would actively take away from the majority of those 500,000 stories. I know this sounds corny as shit, but it's true. Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't about the scripted plot. The point of the game is the journey.